writing, and I haven't been waiting for a response. I've actually been waiting for validation, you know? I've been waiting for somebody to say, you know, you've got great writing capability, what you've got to offer is brilliant, you matter, your story matters, your journey matters, these other women's stories who were within this book, their stories matter.
So what I started to do, I started to just like buy and sell domain names when the internet was like literally you had to plug it into your wall. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It's so easy because you're chasing this dream and this vision that you have, and to feel as though you need to be working all hours of the day. And yes, there are some days where you need to push yourself that little bit harder, but you really need, if you haven't got your health and your well-being, you haven't got any business.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of She's the Boss Female Entrepreneur Stories, where I share the stories of phenomenal women in business from all over the UK and beyond. If you haven't already done so, please make sure you click that subscribe button so that you're the first to know when I release a new video. And if you're listening, make sure you click the follow button for that same reason. Today, I am joined by somebody that I really respect in the business community, entrepreneur Melissa Shervington. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So tell everybody about your current business and your journey to business, because I've known you for quite a number of years, and I know that what you're doing now isn't what you've always done. So tell us a little bit more about what you do and the journey to doing it.
Okay, so currently I'm working with entrepreneurs, quite concise in terms of who my ideal client market is, and that is anybody running a small business for 1 to 5 years as an average. Because what I've found is that is a sticking point. When businesses are at that point of growth, a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves stuck in the business. So I'm working with entrepreneurs through events, training programs, coaching and mastermind programs too.
So how did you come to this? Because previously I know you were running an estate agency company. So what was the jump from that to what you're doing now?
So the reason why I started the estate agency business was because at the time I've been a trainer for 10 years, and I recognised that I was working on a freelance basis and wasn't really running a business, because if I didn't work, I didn't get paid. So that kind of conflicted with everything I'd learned and believed in regarding business. So I knew I wanted to set up a business that I could set up from scratch, that could run effectively without me being there. An estate agency just seemed like the best thing to do, because I've come from a property background, also invested in a portfolio myself, so I knew the process. So I just decided that it would be an estate agency business. It wasn't something that I'd worked in, hadn't been an employee. I just made a decision and went for it.
And when was that? How many years ago was that when you launched that business?
2014. So I had a 5-year plan to grow and sell.
So you started it with that plan in mind?
Yeah.
And then you sold it at the end of that 5-year period, right?
Yeah, 5.5 years. Yeah.
I love that. I love that you were so intentional about what you wanted to do and actually did it within the time frame that you'd specified.
Yeah.
So how did you go about, and not to dig too deeply, but did you go and look for somebody to buy the business, or did somebody approach you? What was that process like?
I'd been approached quite a few times. In the world of estate agency, you've got your corporate agents and your independent. The corporates are the big fish, so they like to go fishing for the smaller fish, and that's how they grow, through acquisition. But I knew I wanted to only be bought by another independent agent, because the ethos, the values are completely different. So I put the word out. So like in most industries, you become part of networks, you get to know people, other owners of other businesses. So I'd built up quite a good rapport with a few other independent agents. So I knew I chose who I'd like to do business with, put the word out, and then I had 6 potential buyers who were all sort of pressing me to buy.
How did you make the decision of who to sell to?
The decision was made by looking at my team and thinking who would be the best person to buy, who could also take my team on with them. And that's twofold. One, because I built a really strong family almost ethos within the team, and they'd sewn a lot into it. And also because of the client base. So we had a really good relationship with clients, and I didn't want to just pass them over to another agent who didn't continue the service that we'd been delivering.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because you started the business with the intention to sell. Therefore, when you did sell, was it just like, okay, I've done what I came to do and kind of move on? Or did you have any kind of feelings of, oh, I don't have that business anymore?
Yeah, definitely. The roller coaster, I'd say, because the sale completed in December 2019, so 3 months ago. So 6 months leading up to that, I'd begun the process. So I'd started getting everything packaged up and ready to hand over. So I was in operational mode of the sale of the business. So my emotions weren't really involved at that point. When it hit home was the first Monday of January. So I remember waking up thinking, okay, and normally we'd have a WhatsApp group with all the team members, and I'd normally put a message in there every morning, and there wasn't a team. I didn't have a team, and at that point it hit me. So January was a really rocky month. I went away, went on a solo trip, and everything started to hit me, and I thought, have I made the right decision? There was slight feelings of regret, but it was emotion that I worked through, and February I was fine. So there was that 1 month of up and down.
I love that yours was just 1 month. When I sold my business, I sold my business in 2015. It wasn't really until last year, so that's like 4 years later, that I was like, okay, I'm at peace with it now. I was grieved at like the first year, but I think also it was the circumstances, because I didn't really want to sell. I had a new baby, so hormones was all over the place. But the first year was really difficult. And that's why I asked the question, to see if kind of your experience was different. Yeah. Did you, when selling the business then, because you'd already been doing training, etc. before, had you already launched yourself or your business, Melissa Shervington, as the coach and doing the business events before, or did you wait until the sale had gone through? Like, what was the linkage? Is it something that you planned, I'm going to sell and I'm going to do this, or did it happen after the fact?
So there's a few things that I've been running parallel. So like I said, I've been training for 10 years, and that's that's diversity and inclusion, leadership. I've created training programs for estate agents as well, which that's a separate thing that I'm still doing. And I'd started coaching, and that started quite informally. So people would approach me because I'd seen that I'd done it and set up an estate agency. So it was mainly around property and estate agency. And then I'd get people just come to me with random business ideas and ask for help. So that kind of evolved organically. And then I began coaching, I'd say 3 months before I sold. So September, one-on-one, which isn't the model that I want to continue with, but that's how I started. So all of these things were happening at the same time. So I was juggling all these balls. And then in the new year, I kind of merged everything I was doing together and launched it as Melissa Shervington. So there was a build-up.
So now you're kind of fully in it. I assume that you know that you've made the right decision.
Yeah.
How have you kind of adjusted to having a completely different type of business and doing something completely different?
I think it's not, although it's worlds apart from estate agency, because I've been doing that, especially training, and I've done events as well, and not just business related events. I've done events for landlords, seminars, etc. in the world of property and estate agency. I'm not new to that. It's more, I guess the focus is different because it is entrepreneurs and it is business, but the tools that I'm using, I've been using for years. So it's really, I feel that I'm applying them in the right format now, whereas before I was kind of trapped in the world of an estate agent, and people were recognising me as that when I always knew I wasn't an estate agent. It was just a business. It was an argument. So now I feel that I'm being more authentic. I can be me, and I can really bring myself out in what I'm doing. Walking
in purpose.
Purpose, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go way back. Tell me about kind of your early years, childhood, teenager, or your teenage period. Was there any signs at that age, or did you already have a plan in your head to become self-employed or to become a business owner, or is that something that kind of happened latterly, and what kind of influences did you have around you, if any, that would have led you down the business path?
Okay, so I always knew from a young age that I wanted to run my own business. I grew up in Handsworth, Birmingham, went to primary school in Handsworth, passed my 11 plus, was one of a very small number of people from my school who did. Went to senior school, still in Handsworth, but now I'm in grammar school, so it was a completely different demographics internally in the school, culture shift. Became a bit of a rebel by my teenage years. I hated rules, regulations, recognised that I was good in school and I was performing, but I wasn't academically driven. It wasn't really enticing me. Didn't know what I wanted to do exactly, but just knew that I wanted to be my own boss at that age. So I was a bit of a rebel, left school, started A-levels, dropped out, and then just began to find my way. I did a HNC in business studies, and that led on, did my master's later on. But I was finding myself at that age, not knowing which direction I wanted to go in. But there was always a theme around property. And I did my work experience at a housing association, and that experience stayed with me because I loved it. So that led me back to housing, and I worked in social housing for 7 years from the age of 19, and then I left, and that's been my only career in terms of a job.
So what would you say were some of the biggest lessons you learned in employment that you were then able to kind of use as a transferable skill in business? Because we always hear this thing, and there's kind of two camps, right? So there's the camp of, if you're an entrepreneur, you're born as an entrepreneur and you should never have a job and blah blah blah. Then there's the other camp, which is where I sit, that actually sometimes being in the working world can really be beneficial to you in business, whether that be you doing it at the same time or doing your job first and then starting business. What would you say were some of the lessons that you learned that you've been able to apply?
I'd say having a structure, having systems, having KPIs, so we were clear as to what the annual plans were. Because for us as frontline staff, it would never be like a 20-year strategic plan or even a 10 or 5. We'd have some insight, but we were working to more 12-month plans. So that's where I guess my skills really kicked in around how do you manage budgets, because I was involved in that, managing my own budget, working to deadlines, pulling in on different team members, learning from what's happening outside of the sector. How can we apply it? Best practice, policies, procedures. It's all that structure that a lot of entrepreneurs, when they've just gone straight into business, they haven't had that. And for me, that builds a solid foundation. So as a business, you can sustain rather than you're just running on a passion, which burns out down the line if you don't have that foundation that you're working from.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. I'm always banging on about systems and processes and structure, but I am the example that you just gave, because I finished university, worked for a year, but not more than 3 months in one job, and then started my first business. So I didn't ever have an understanding really of the behind the scenes kind of structure of how a business should really run, because I'd never really worked in a proper business for any extended period of time. But the reason I'm so passionate about systems and processes and that kind of thing now is because that was kind of one of my downfalls in my business. So I didn't really have KPIs. I didn't really have any systems. I didn't really have 12-year plans, or I would make the plans and not necessarily stick to them. And I was just running on passion. Like, I love this, and I'm going to do it. But there was no actual real structure. By the time I got to that point, a couple of years in, not damage, but the damage had kind of already been done. So it's refreshing to hear you say that, because I always come into contact with entrepreneurs that really think that having a job is some sort of like embarrassment, when actually it can be so useful for you.
100%.
But if you haven't had a job, then the next best thing is to work with somebody like yourself, or somebody like myself, that can help you with those systems and processes. So in terms of kind of role models, you said you always knew you wanted to be in business. Where did that come from? Was it somebody in your kind of network or your family that you looked at and said, I want to be like that person? Was it somebody in the media? Who were your role models growing up?
It was. My main role model at the time, at a young age, was my cousin, who I'd call a brother. We were like that, really, really tight. And he died when I was 20. He was stabbed. He was 23, but he was very, very wise, like way beyond his years. And he was an entrepreneur. So he would go abroad, purchase goods. Like he'd go to Thailand, for example, bring back materials, goods, come back, sell them. And I'd watch how he'd do that. He took me when I was about 17 to Turkey, Istanbul. We went with empty suitcases one Christmas, about a week before Christmas. He gave me £250 and we went and bought belts, wallets, clothes, came back, sold them. And I can't remember what I made, but I know I made about 4 times what he'd given me as an investment. So he started to teach me from a young age about how you can purchase goods, sell goods, how you can make a profit, how to monitor your finances, buying and selling techniques, negotiation skills. I learned that from him at a young age, but I think it was more subconscious at that stage. I didn't recognize it. He inspired me, and then when he was taken away, those were my dark days for a time, but that was embedded in me. Also, I was doing silver service at the time for an agent, and I remember we would get paid. We'd do things like Royal Ascot, Twickenham, like really high-profile sports events, and we'd get paid £40 for the day, and that would be from 5:30 in the morning, and sometimes we wouldn't get back till 11 o'clock at night. And one day I was in the office and I saw on the desk of the lady who was like our line manager what they were getting paid. So they were getting £120, we were getting 40. That's business. But then I started to do the maths and think, okay, coach load, 50 of us, sometimes 2 or 3 coaches. What profit are they making? So I was around 20, I think, at that age. No, I was younger. I would have been about 17. That was before my housing career. And straight away, that planted a seed for me to think, okay, this is how I need to be operating like them. So my first idea was a recruitment agency, which is very similar to a state agency. So I ended up doing a state agency, but that was the model that was in my mind from a young age.
I love that you were looking at how much money they were getting. This don't add up. Why are you getting that much? Yeah, no, I've been there and had those same thoughts. Like, actually, this doesn't make any sense. Why are you getting paid all that and I'm going doing all of the work? I think a lot of entrepreneurs at some point, if they had aspirations as a younger person, that's normally where it comes from, right? Seeing how much the boss gets paid and realizing that you're kind of getting shafted. But as you said, that is business. Yeah. So going back to your estate agency business then, you were running that for quite a number of years. What would you say were some of the biggest challenges that you faced and how did you overcome them?
So when I first started out, we were in sort of borderline Great Barking standing in a very small office with 2 desks, and I started without any clients. So I wouldn't advocate that for anybody. That was my method. So I'd open the doors, literally furnished it, got everything ready, and then I went through my phone book and called everybody I knew. So usual practice would be you build up a portfolio and then you launch in a estate agency. So I did things the other way around. So that was, although it was a challenge, that was my drive, because I thought, I started this thing, I need to make sure I get some clients. As we grew, so I always knew I wanted to move into a different area and really target the higher end of the market. So as we grew, 3 years in, I made the decision we would relocate to Sutton Coldfield. And at this point, I wanted to disrupt the market because I'd learnt the industry by now. I'd seen what other estate agents were doing, and I could see there was a gap to do things differently. So making that transition was tough because we were moving from one area, selling and renting one type of property, up to a completely different location where the service had to be different, your marketing had to be different, how you spoke to clients was completely different, and the client avatar had completely changed. So although I knew that, getting my team on board with that was a challenge massively, which I didn't foresee. So that took a lot of nurturing and really giving them the confidence to say we can operate in this area. And then there was a recruitment drive and there was changes in the team. So that was a challenge. Yeah.
How would you rate yourself as a manager? Because
I don't like it. I hate it.
Well, yeah, same reason. Because I know when I had my team, in my head I was like, right, I've got staff. This is amazing. I've made it. But then I realized, actually, I don't really like this. I don't like having to tell people off. I don't like the fact that I give people kind of freedom and they a lot of the time take liberties with it, or they don't necessarily. And I think this was also because I wasn't very good at recruiting. They didn't necessarily know how to take initiative, so I had to do a lot of hand holding. So there was two things that I don't think I was very good at. One was actually managing the team. The other thing was recruiting the right people. What you say, you didn't like it either. What is it about it that you didn't like?
I lack patience. I'll be the first to admit it. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this symptom where you get an idea and you want to do it now. Yes. It's like quite knee-jerk. You know you can do it, but then you've got to have your team on board, which was the example I was giving. So when I get an idea, I want to act, and I found it difficult to get that same energy in my team because they don't have the same. It's my vision. So how do you then communicate your vision and get people excited about it and believe that they can do it at the same time as you? That's a challenge. I like to get on with it, just get on with the job, grow the business, always looking at new opportunities. Managing, especially micromanaging, is not my area. It's not my cup of tea. I don't enjoy the management side. So I recruited a couple of managers, and I think that's the hardest role to recruit for, because managers, they've got to get the balance right between you as a leader and the team. And I'd found that the managers would end up integrating with the team, and then I'm ending up managing the manager and the team and thinking, this isn't how it was meant to be. So yeah, that has been the area that has niggled me. Managing teams is tricky.
Yeah, I think it's overrated. Having staff is overrated, honestly. And that's usually the main thing, the main goal that startups are focusing. When I get staff, I need to get my team and I need my this and my that. And actually, it's overrated. When I had a manager, I employed a couple of managers. One of them sued me. The other one stole one of the business concepts and ran off with it. So just generally, why I prefer now to kind of work independently. At some point, I probably will work with more freelancer type people, but I don't ever want to have my own members of staff that I have to do, because it's just not something that I'm interested in at all.
I understand that completely.
So based on what you're doing now and the work that you're kind of pursuing in terms of working with entrepreneurs, what is the kind of biggest lesson that you want to impart on the people that you work with? What's the biggest takeaway that you want them to finish working with you and say, Melissa's changed this specific thing?
It's that, as cliche as it is, we've all heard it, you get stuck working in your business and not on it. Very cliche, but it's happening all over the place. Entrepreneurs get stuck in the business, and when you're stuck, I personally experienced burnout nearly 2 years ago now, like really badly, because I'd done exactly that. Although I knew I'd started the business with an idea that actually I'm arm's length, I'm not going to be heavily involved, I ended up getting involved and burning out as a consequence. So I'm really passionate about helping entrepreneurs to look at the bigger picture, spend enough time on strategy and not get caught up in the operations, not get to a point where clients are dependent upon them, because that's also a really bad symptom, and really help them to make that transition. So that's where I guess going through the process myself, now being able to help others from an external perspective when they can't see it because they're stuck in the business, is how do you start to implement things that you can gradually start to step away. The other thing is having an exit strategy. I wouldn't market it as that, because I don't want to attract people who have had enough and want out. So it's more about how do you have that end goal in mind,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what will keep you focused.
Mm-hmm.
And most people start a business and don't actually know how it will end, where it will end. They just think they'll keep going forever.
Yeah.
Get lost.
How do you broach that with your clients? Because I know when I speak to clients, and even when I was running my previous business and I engaged with coaches and consultants, and they would say to me, "What's your exit strategy?" I'd be like, "There's no exit strategy. I'm doing this forever." And when I speak to clients now, they often have the same kind of response. How do you navigate that conversation without getting shut down?
I try, and then it's not life coaching, it is business coaching, but it's important to understand their life goals, their personal goals, and how they differ from the business goals. Because for a lot of entrepreneurs, they just become one. They just get intertwined and it's just goals. So it's how do we now separate these? And what is the purpose? Why are you in business? Is it for legacy? Is it to build an empire? What is it? And then once we've identified their why, then they begin to get more excited because they're emotionally engaged, especially if they're feeling a bit overwhelmed at that point. And then we can start to transition from, okay, now we know the why and that's clear. How do we set these targets and what are the milestones? And then the exit strategy will naturally come from that.
Going back to what you said before, you said you suffered burnout. I had a conversation with one of my other interview participants, Francesca Lechner, a couple of months ago, and she was talking about burnout, and we had quite an in-depth conversation about the idea that a lot of the time people don't realize that they're in burnout when they're in burnout. So if you don't mind sharing, what were some of the kind of symptoms that you had that made you realize that you had burnout, and how did you get over it? How did you get back?
I thought I was just run down. I thought, I'm just tired. I've been really pushing it really hard recently. And then I thought I had the flu. Oh, it will go. Oh, then it's just a chest infection. Then I lost my voice. And I remember that week I had a speaking engagement and I was booked to deliver training on 2 days. I couldn't do anything. I've never lost my voice before. It went for 3 weeks. I couldn't speak. 3 weeks.
Gosh.
Yeah.
It's a long time to not have a voice.
A long time. I couldn't get out of bed. It got that bad, like I'd sit up and literally didn't have the energy in me. But I'd pushed myself, and even though my voice had been going for a while, but I'd push through, that mentality, press through it, push on, keep on going. There's too much to be done. I can't stop now. I'll stop once I've got through this next phase. And because I didn't listen to my body and I didn't take heed, my body just said, that's it, shut down. And literally I couldn't do anything. And it was the most frustrating 3 weeks of my life, I really believe. Like, I couldn't do anything, but my brain was still active. But physically, I was good for nothing. Couldn't even have a telephone conversation.
The way how this is terrifying me while you speak, I'm like, I don't know what I would do. That sounds terrifying.
But it was the biggest turning point for me.
Yeah, I bet it was a huge lesson learned.
Yeah, because after that, I put my health as a priority. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I've still got a long way to go now. But now I recognise the signs. When I've been going too hard, I know when to slow down. I know when to recoup. Building time for me, whereas before I was just going around the clock, going. It was all about growing the business. And it also forced me to practice what I preach and really streamline the business and give more to my team to do, because I had a problem with delegation as well. Like, you can't quite do it like me, so let me just do, and it was like, no, it's time to completely let go and delegate, and make sure everything is systemized. And that really prompted me to do that. And after that, everything run better than it had before without me being as operational or involved.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of entrepreneurs wear that, what you just said, so this idea that without me in the business is not going to run properly and things are not going to be done properly. It's like that's a badge of honor, like the business needs me. But actually it's those kind of situations where you realize you don't want your business to need you, because if the business needs you and you're not available, whether that be physically, mentally, or for whatever other reason, then your business cannot function. And that's the kind of key message that I always share, that you need to learn to delegate. You need to be able to have things automated and systemized. because if the business is 100% or even more than 50% reliant on you yourself, your business is vulnerable.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you said, I'm sure it wasn't a pleasant 3 weeks, but sometimes you have to get slapped back down to get up and do even better. And I'm sure then those things were put in place and you probably were able to feel much better. And rest, I can't stress enough, and I'm sure you would agree, that rest and relaxation is so important. I would say my motto is think big, take action, keep pushing. But what I should have in kind of a little writing underneath is keep pushing, but also make sure you have a rest. Because I am a big proponent of rest and sleep and going to bed early and taking duvet days and doing nothing, holidays, gym, spa. What kind of things would you recommend?
Similarly, holidays, but up until this point, holidays, although I'd be away, I'd still have my laptop, I'd still be doing work, I'd still be making payments, I'd still be in the group chat. So after that, when I went on holiday, I really tried to make sure it was a holiday and just locked down and didn't even open my email unless I really had to. And again, spa days. But I'd found that while I was doing all of these things, I wasn't present until experiencing burnout. So I'd be there, but in my mind, I'm thinking about a client or a next business move or strategy. So I've had to really almost force myself to switch off. And that's hard.
Very hard.
Really hard. Very hard. But building in these things and also time blocking. So like Fridays, although it's Friday today, I try and keep this as a day for me to work on my personal stuff rather than business related. So having key themes, key days, and once a quarter, making sure that it's, even if it's a short break, I'm going somewhere. And again, duvet days. I love a duvet day. I love a duvet day. They're like the best.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing. I'm not that good. I'm still working on it. I think I'm probably gonna have to go to like a mindfulness class or something. I'm not that great still at completely clearing my mind. And I know that, and they say that you can be not doing anything, but if your brain is still worrying, it can still tire you out. So sometimes I can find that I haven't really done much, but I'm exhausted because my brain is just, so it is something that I am also working on, and it's a work in progress. But I definitely think everybody should commit themselves to trying to get to that point where not necessarily the brain has to be 100% clear, because unless you're Buddha, I think that's probably quite complicated, but it's not going at 100 miles per hour all the time, and you are giving yourself like time to actually just not think about much. In terms of delegation, I think this is a really important point. I was speaking to my mortgage advisor actually a couple of days ago, and she was saying that I feel like, and not to speak her business, but she seems like she's going to the point, like she's getting close to a kind of a burnout phase. And I was saying to her, you need to delegate more. She was like, oh no, a lot of the time I'll do it myself. And we had a conversation about that and her explaining why it was so difficult for her to delegate. What kind of advice would you give to somebody that is in that situation and really is precious and holding things on? How, obviously you were kind of forced to have to let go, but how did you manage that process so that it wasn't absolutely like painful to watch?
One of the practical things I did was just emptied my mind and noted everything that I'm doing. So every single task. So I spent a week and just monitored myself. So I just jot it down, everything I did. And then I put that all in an Excel spreadsheet. And then I started to highlight which of these tasks is it only me that can do them, and which don't I need to do, which of them can I delegate. And I started to color code, and then gradually took the things away from my list that I didn't have to do, created a process around it, trained up a member of the team or a couple of members of the team, and then handed that over. And I'd monitor that for a while until I knew and I was confident that they were okay and delivering it. And what I found was some of the things they were doing better than me. And these are the things that I didn't want to let go of, but yet they were better than me at doing the task. So that then encouraged me to do more of that. And then it did come to a point where I kind of felt like I was redundant. Okay, what am I doing here? And that felt uncomfortable, but it felt good at the same time. So it took me I'd say a good year, 12 months really, to go through that whole process and hand everything over. But I just started, like I said, with just emptying my mind and jotting things down.
Yeah. Well, that's also something that I always suggest. So I do something called a Build My System session, where I work with clients to map out pretty much everything that's in their head and put that into a document that they can then use to train staff and to start delegating to staff. And it's not really that tedious of a process.
No, it's not.
Yeah, but people just don't necessarily see the value in it, and therefore don't put the time aside to just do it. But spending that week, for example, save you so much hours, days, weeks of time in the future if you would just take the time in the first instance to do it. And I always say as well, when you're starting a business, don't wait until you start to take on staff to do that process. Actually do it as you're going along, because once you get staff, you now have to deal with them, and that's taking up additional time. Whereas if you just start with the processes all mapped out in the first place, now you can incorporate them into going through those processes themselves, and it just helps you onboard staff much quicker as well.
And also get your team involved in doing the same thing.
Yes.
So that's what I had everybody doing. Every single process had to be mapped out, diagrams, screenshot, if it involved IT, which a lot of it did. So it was very easy. So as soon as a new starter came in, they could pass that to them and they could learn from that process. And they evolve as well. Yeah. And it's important to, always check them. Like I'd say every 6 months, just go back over them. Are they still relevant? Has anything changed? Just keep on working on those documents.
And I'm sure in the sale of your business, going through that process would have really made it much more attractive to the people buying it. And if you are planning on selling a business that you're starting or running, starting as you mean to go on, so starting with the idea to sell, by mapping out those system processes is going to make you more attractive to a buyer, because now everything's not in your head. If you sell the business and everything's in your head, what is it that you're selling? Whereas if you've gone through that process as you have, then now they're buying tangible systems and processes, and the business can continue in your absence.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So, speaking of advice, what 3 pieces of advice would you give to a woman who is in the early stages of entrepreneurship? What would you advise her to do?
I'd say definitely know your why. And if you don't know your why, find it. That's a whole nother workshop. But know your why, know your purpose and why you're doing what you do. Because when things get tough, if you don't have that solid, you'll fall off, or you'll get overwhelmed or get frustrated. As we've discussed, systemize and process your business from day one, and then recruiting the right team. I've made many mistakes along the way. I wouldn't say many, but a few mistakes.
I'd say many.
So a lot of people think you recruit from skills and looking at what's on the CV, but for me, it's all about attitude. So talent and attitude, and that's what I've found. If you recruit on those 2 things, you can mold, you can shape people into the role, and the heart's in it. So it's all about them having the passion. So talent, attitude and passion over any form of skill, degree, whatever it is, because if you haven't got the right people on board, it makes life difficult for you.
Yeah, for sure. I second all of that. If people want to find out more about you and your services, what platforms are you on?
Well, I've got a website, which is melissashervington.com, Instagram, Melissa_Shervington, Facebook, Melissa Shervington. It's just Melissa Shervington.
Awesome sauce. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much of your story with us and for being so open and honest. Really appreciate it. And thank you at home for watching, for listening. I hope that you have taken out as much value from this as I have. I know Melissa's dropped some proper gems and nuggets today, so I hope that you've been taking notes. If you haven't already done so, again, please click that subscribe button and make sure you click the like button. Make sure you share in your networks, and if there's anything that Melissa said that really resonated with you, which I'm sure it must have, please write a comment so we can get your feedback. It's good to know that these interviews are having an impact. So don't just watch or just listen and be quiet. Actually engage. Let us know what you think. I will be back next week, Sunday at 8 p.m. with another She's the Boss Female Entrepreneur story. So make sure you tune in. And Melissa, thank you again for joining me.
Thanks for having me.